Hey, welcome to another episode of Southern Ohio Matters with host Gina Collinsworth. Gina Collinsworth is a public information coordinator with the Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission, or better known as OVRDC. Gina, it's always a pleasure having a program in which you talk about many of the aspects that's happening in Southern Ohio.
Hey, Patrick, how are you today? I've got a new location, as you can see. I'm coming to everyone here on Southern Ohio Matters from the office of the Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission in Waverly, Ohio. Today's show is exciting, Patrick. It's all about the census, why the census is important, and why we need to make sure we get our numbers up here in Ohio and Southern Ohio, especially all the ways the census can impact our life. My first guest today is Jacob Taylor, and he's going to talk about his job and how the census impacts his job. Then we have Pam Crawford and Annya Thompson from Pike County CAO to talk about the local response that they're doing here to get the census numbers up and get everyone involved. And last today, we're going to talk with Helene Kramer Longton. Helene is the regional rep for the US Census, and she's coming to us from Louisville, Kentucky. We've got a great show planned to talk about everything that goes along with our US Census.
Hey, it really sounds like a really good program that you put together, and it's my understanding Jacob Taylor. What does Jacob Taylor do?
Jacob works with me here at OVRDC. He is the Geographic Information Services Coordinator. We have two of those on staff, and Jacob does a lot with data and numbers and collecting data and then modeling it to make it meaningful. So we thought we would talk with Jacob, and let's see if we can check in with him now. Jacob, how are you doing today? It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Gina. Thank you for having me.
I always love to talk to you in the office, Jacob, because you always make data interesting in a way that helps us understand the impact of the numbers. So today, I thought it would be great for our viewers out there if we brought you on the show to talk a little bit about what you do at OVRDC and why the census is important, and maybe a little bit of fun facts about the census.
All right. Thank you. Well, at OVRDC, I'm a research and planning specialist. I do a lot of work with GIS, which is, as you said, Geographic Information Systems. And what that ends up looking like is a lot of maps, visualizations, and uses of data to present it in a way that's usable and not in a long spreadsheet that no one wants to read.
Just a bunch of numbers. That means nothing to us in our real life, does it?
Yeah, and one of the greatest, most informative versions of data is the United States Census. So
we have talked about this, Jacob. You and I are in charge of, in our office, we're helping coordinate with our local census efforts, and that's what the show's about today. But some of the interesting things that you have found historically about the census, I think we should share that with viewers because it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, the census has been long running. Since 1790, we've had a decennial census, which is what's about to come up. The decennial census is once every 10 years, and for the first time, the census changes every decade. But for the first time, this is going to be a short form only census, and I've personally completed it. It's pretty short, and so I'm happy to talk about it and encourage everyone to do it. The census is like I said, one of the best forms of data that we have, and when you look at that over the time frame since 1790, you can see some really interesting patterns. Like since that time, every census, New York has been the largest city in the nation.
1790. That's amazing.
Yeah, 230 years now. So, and then also interesting is that only 3 states have been ranked as the largest in population in the United States. We've had Virginia in the first few decades, New York for a long period of time, and then in about the last 60 years, California.
So in our office, Jacob, some of the data that you use is what you would call estimates. And the great thing about the census is it's actual data, right?
Yeah. The estimates and can be a challenge to work with, depending on how those are modeled, and depending on what size of areas you're looking at. Estimates can be really good on the national level and even at the state level. Numbers for Ohio, coming from the annual updates, are usually really accurate. But when you get down to the county level and stuff like this, it's where the census becomes, once again, very important. Because when we're looking at places like Southern Ohio, we're looking at small population numbers relatively, and none of our counties are larger than the sample size.
So Jacob, we were talking about some of the census numbers and how important it is because it's real data. You even have some examples of what has happened in our area, Southern Ohio counties, when census numbers are not exactly accurate. For instance, in Benton County, you told me the other day about what happened there.
When census response rates are low, we can run into issues. A lot of federal and state funding are related to census data, and when you have numbers that low response rates, you can run into issues like I've heard about at Benton County. One community that was applying for a grant had data that was census numbers that were inaccurate relative to what the community thought should have been there, and to qualify for the grant that they were looking for, they needed to have low income in that particular community. But since the response rate was low, they didn't qualify. So they had to come in and do a survey of the area and have it redone, which was an expense that the community definitely didn't need.
I understand the data is important. Let's show people a little bit about what you do in your day-to-day role and show them some of the data that we have collected that's available on our website for anyone who would want to look at it. It's pretty interesting to see, you know, we're talking about the census, so we need to see what does that look like once it's been collected and modeled and mapped. And you have that right there on your screen, and you can talk a little bit about that. I think it's pretty interesting to help us understand our region better and who lives here and what it's like for them.
So this is the map that you were speaking of, Gina. It's on our website. It's from the 2010. It uses information from the 2010 census. It's a block group explorer. The block groups are a division of the counties that are used to look at more specific areas, and the map can show different parts of the census data. Right now we're looking at population density, and when you're looking at population density, one thing that's really interesting in the counties is that you can see where the county seats are. Portsmouth, Waverly, Chillicothe, and this is one of the uses of the census by visualizing the data. Or you can look at things like, since it collects data related to age, you can look at where elderly populations are, or high poverty rates are all across the state, as well as minorities, uninsured, all kinds of information that's collected in either the decennial census or the American Community Survey, which is the yearly update.
You know, it is so revealing to see data in this way, Jacob. I mean, numbers don't really tell a story visually the way this kind of representation does.
Yes.
And this is something that you would work on in your day-to-day work, I know, because we work in the same office.
Yeah, we do all kinds of visualizations and data analysis. We have communities that come to us and request data pulled from the census or from other sources to be used in their grant applications or in general general other duties of theirs.
And I think it's interesting too that the census is used a lot now. The big craze is to do genealogical study and figure out where your history and your family comes from. So a lot of people will use it for that, to research, their family. Have you ever done that?
Yes, that is one of the big uses of the census. I've personally used it to look back at my own family history in Southern Ohio. It's also used for many other things. People use it. It's used for congressional apportionment, as most people know. There's at the last census, there was talk about Ohio losing a lot of their delegation because of population loss.
Yeah.
Good census count negated some of that. It can also be used for many other uses too.
And before we wrap up our part here this morning, Jacob, let's show the map that you have. It's up-to-date numbers of the actual return rates we have in Southern Ohio right now. And, it might be a great way for people to understand how important it is when you see the rate for the return in Ohio. It's much higher than it is here in Southern Ohio.
So as you can see, there is a map of the Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission area, Southern Ohio, and the census response rates. Right now, our response rates are not so great in Southern Ohio. We'd really like to get them up around 80% or greater. The Ohio response rate is only 66.3, but outside of Claremont County, most of Southern Ohio is under that number. So we really encourage everyone to get out, respond to the census. It's really important for the communities that we live in. The funding, the way it affects planning and encourages development is all a very vital aspect of the census and planning.
What is one of the main reasons people do not respond?
Well, I think there are probably a lot of reasons that people don't respond, but one of the ones that seems to be coming up a lot with this census is kind of a fear that the information will be misused or used in ways that they don't want. And I think that's not something that you should really worry about. The census is very, very secure and very concerned about people's privacy.
Right.
They don't even release the whole census records until over 50 years after the census is completed.
Jacob, this map really shows us the response rates we're getting, and this is up-to-date information as of this week. What happens if we don't get the response rate that we need for the area?
Well, if we're reliant on the estimates instead of getting a good response rate that'll show us the real numbers, we could come into some very strange and negative situations for Southern Ohio. In the previous census, from 2000 to 2010, the estimates were expecting drops in many of the counties that didn't occur. For example, Scioto County was estimated to drop over 3,000 people, or about 1 in 25. Brown County was expected to lose 1,000, or 1 out of every 50.
Wow, those are big numbers. I'm glad you're here today. I appreciate you taking the time, and I know our viewers do, because you have some unique insights to why this census is so important. And coming up on the show in just a minute, we're going to be speaking with a couple of ladies here locally at Pike County CAO who are working on the ground in Pike County to get the census numbers up. And then later in the show, we're going to find out more from Helene Kramer Longton, who is the media rep for the region. She's based in Louisville, Kentucky, for the US Census. She talks a lot about what you mentioned before, which are some of the security questions that people have about the data, what happens to their data when they respond, and that might be why some people don't always respond. So great information, Jacob. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I found that information very revealing, especially the low numbers and how that affects uh, possible potential infrastructure grants or other kinds of grants.
It's interesting data, isn't it, Patrick? Jacob is very knowledgeable. And the next guests that we have for this show, they are also very knowledgeable. They are what I call boots on the ground here in Pike County, Ohio, Southern Ohio. We're going to speak with Pam Crawford and Annya Thompson from the Pike County CAO. And I actually got to go to the facility and meet with them and interview them in person, although we were maintaining social distancing and we had our masks at the ready. So let's speak with them next. Great. Thank you for taking time to talk to us a little bit about what we're doing in Pike County about the census. So Pam, let me ask you, why do you feel like the census is so important for our region and for Pike County?
Well, I think it's important because we're a rural area, and with our population, we have some of the hardest to count because they're the least likely to complete the census. We feel like we see many of those types of customers, whether it's coming through the door, whether it's through appointments, telephone calls. We get many phone calls, especially during some of our programs, our EAT program, our summer cooling program. So this is an opportunity for us to get the information out to the customers, let them know that it's safe. And we're the messengers. We're the ones that are convincing people or talking to people and letting them know how important it is, because it brings money into our county. It's data driven. We get different types of funding sources, block grants, CDBG, community service block grant, for different other types, Head Start, early childhood, Section 8. I mean, it's just that I could go on and on with a list of programs that it benefits in our area. So like I say, we're the messenger, and we're just trying to get people to complete the information.
Well, I work at Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission, so a lot of the things that we do are related to federal programs, and one of them is Appalachian Regional Commission, and that is so important for an ARC designation, and a lot of it's based on census data. So I'm glad to see that you kind of have led the charge. Sam is the person who put me in charge with you guys. He said you're doing a great job of getting the word out, and Annya, he mentioned you specifically, that you are really getting the word out and doing a good job. So tell me, what are some of the things you've been doing to try to get people out and get the information to them?
Well, what we're doing during the pandemic, Pam and the Head Start program had spearheaded a food drive and a food pantry drop. So we had volunteers come to the agency, pick up food and drop to homebound seniors, disabled, and low-income folks. And that's what started it off. And then we were doing also the food at our senior center, which is the fresh fruit and vegetable program, which is meeting a lot of people in the county. So all of those are getting flyers, information, how to, the 1-800, I mean, it's not a 1-800 number, but it is 1-844-330-2020 for folks to call in and do the census over the phone.
Very good.
Yes, and we push that a lot. Though we have folks that do have cell phones and it's limited usage. And during this pandemic, like Pam had it set up in our office space, a whole computer site just for census work. And then the pandemic hit and we had to shut everything down. But we still want to stress to folks, it's not too late to do that now. And you can call from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. in the morning with that number and get your census taken as of where you were staying as of April 1st.
You make that a great point, that the census has so many different impacts in our daily lives that we don't think about. Thank you guys for taking time today to talk with us about the census, and especially thank you for what you're doing out in the community to get the word out and get all of our people counted. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Patrick, that was great information, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. You can pick up a lot of information by watching some of those videos that you did. Great segment. Again, I really appreciate your taking the time to go and talk with them.
Pam Crawford and Annya Thompson from the Pike County Community Action Organization. I appreciate them taking the time out. So to finish up on our show today, that's all about the census, we are going to speak with Helene Kramer Longton. She is the media regional rep for the US Census. She has a lot of great information about why the census is important, but also about what happens to your data once it's collected. How secure is it? I think sometimes that's what keeps people from responding, maybe some fear. So Helene is going to talk to us on the phone from Louisville, Kentucky next.
Today we are doing a show all about the U.S. Census, and my guest is Helene Kramer Longton. Helene, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Gina. How are you?
I'm doing great, and it's great to have you on the phone this morning. And we're here in Southern Ohio, of course. And Helene, where are you right now?
I am located in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm the media specialist for the Kentucky and Southern Ohio lane.
And tell me, how did you get involved with the census? I know we've spoke on the phone before today. We care about our community and, try to do what we can.
Yeah, so we sure do share that. Well, I started my career in television news a number of years ago and then made the pivot. A lot of the communications work that I've done of late has been in the private sector. And while I love that, there is a real tug that I always feel to get back into the community and do things that make our quality of life better. And I can think of no other place right now than being with the 2020 census. And hopefully, we're making a good go of it. We're reaching a lot of people in both Ohio and Kentucky, and we will get those numbers up because, as you mentioned, it is so important.
So let's talk about that. My first question, why is the census so important to our region especially?
Well, it is important to your region in normal times, extremely important because of all of the very important quality of life programs that federal funds fund. So census data informs spending allocations by the federal government to local communities. So the higher the count, or the better the count, that the U.S. Census gets, the more federal dollars will go to our local communities. And if everybody gets counted, every locality will get the federal funds that they deserve.
So now that we know how important it is, Helene, tell us what are some of the barriers we see and some of the ways people can respond to the census.
Well, and first I should say, to be, as specific as possible, federal funding is all about health care, Medicare and Medicaid. We know very few people who don't have a connection to those benefits. Our highways, new federal highways and the upkeep of current federal highways and some of our state highways where federal assistance becomes applicable. Do we know anybody that doesn't benefit, from having good transportation? Probably not. Our public school system, K through 12, get federal funds. Our school lunches, our daycare programs, the arts. That's something that a lot of folks don't think about or associate with federal funding, but it's true. Federal funds go to those things. So again, it's so important. You asked about barriers. There are some barriers. We have a lot of people in our country and in many of our local areas who don't have great access to broadband. And that can be a barrier because this year, for the 2020 census, for the first time, internet access, responding online, is available to every household. We still have, because there is a digital divide in our country, options for folks to call a toll-free number to respond to the census, and also, the option to respond by U.S. mail. And there are still many, many people in our country who respond those other two ways. There are some populations that have traditionally been difficult to count, and those populations have not changed. What they have in common very often is poverty. So we find that children in poverty are often difficult to count. African American males can be difficult to count. Some of our international households can be difficult to count because of the language barrier. And right now, in the middle of a pandemic, our health crisis, we have a lot of people who had problems in their lives prior to this pandemic who are experiencing even higher levels of unemployment and having problems with their health. And those are all challenges for people, even though it doesn't take a whole lot of time to fill out the census. It's up to us at the US Census to continue to reach out for folks and to get them to fill out their census.
Everything that's connected to counting all of our residents and making sure our voices are heard.
Online is the way so far that the majority of households in the United States have responded. You can call the 800 number, which is 1-888-330-2020, 1-888-330-2020, or you can fill out a paper form. And many households have paper forms, particularly if they live in counties where the response wasn't quite what it needed to be in 2010. Here is the good news. We have until the end of October. That is the deadline. This will take 10 minutes of your time. You have until October to do it. The sooner the better. Get it out of the way, and you can rest assured that the federal dollars that your local community is entitled to will come your community's way if everybody fills out the census.
Thank you, Helene, for coming on the show today. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Gina. It has been a pleasure being with you. And Southern Ohio, we love you. Fill out your census.
I think the one thing I want people to take away from today's show is how important it is for them to respond, for them to be counted, and the ways that it impacts our community down to the level of schools and roads and hospitals and direct funds, and services for people who need support. I mean, it's so important, and it takes just a few minutes. I took my census response and did the mail-in version. You can call the 800 number. You can go online and complete your census. There are many ways for you to be part of this count, and it's so important.
And my wife and I have taken it online, so we found it of great value.
And it doesn't take long, does it? 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
You're absolutely right. And we're talking with Gina Collinsworth. Gina Collinsworth is the Public Information Coordinator with the Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission. Gina, great program, and thank you. I'm Patrick Dengel for Southern Ohio Matters with host Gina Collinsworth.